waiting to go live. Okay. Being the appointed hour, I'll call the work session on House Bill 1417 to order. I have invited Representative Ken Weiler to give us a little background because we've had this discussion repeatedly. And so just to give us a 30,000 foot, bring us up to speed, I would appreciate you letting the people here and the public might be watching fill in the blank spots.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Ken Weiler, Rockingham District 13. Been in Kingston since 1970, and the retirement system was created in '68. And first few years I lived in Kingston, 50 years ago, there were probably only 4 or 5 people in the retirement system. Maybe the chief of police, the fire chief, the road agent, town clerk, maybe a librarian, and of course all the teachers. Subsequently, as I watched the growth, and I don't think my town was untypical, now the fire department has about 12 full-time employees, group 2. The police department has about 12, group 2. The road department always has about 10 full-time employees. So this is typical of the growth of this retirement system that we don't often refer to. It's grown so much since its inception. And when I sat down to do the budget for 12 and 13, I'm looking at this huge growth that I had experienced to date then. And we couldn't even project it. We were working on a very tight budget. The Democrats had overestimated the revenue in the previous biennium, and then in this first year of it, they realized their error and were trying to cut $200 million out of it. And one of the things they did was reduce the state's contribution to non-state employees from 35% to 25%. I thought, whoa, we're going to see a lot of pushback about this. Not a whimper, because the Democrats did it. And I wasn't empowered to do it then. So, okay, what are we going to do? This looks like it's continuing to grow. I've got a budget so tight, had to cut it 10%, was the orders we all followed. Okay, if this growth of this retirement system keeps going, how can I predict how much to put in this line for the 25% at the time? And if a town decides, you know, everybody deserves a 6% pay raise, that's 6% more we have to contribute. If everybody decides we're going to add 12 new employees, that's 12 new employees we have to contribute to. Those were things I could not control. We sat here in these divisions asking very tough questions for all the people that come before us to try to project where are we going to be in 27 months? How much more are you going to spend? How much more increase do you see in this line or that line? And we try to get it very tight because we have some very tight, sometimes, projections. So what I did to change the 25% to 0 was cause all the employees to contribute more. I added 2% to the group 1 people who were contributing 5% at the time, mostly teachers. And then to the police, I think we added 2 1/4, and to the firemen, 2 3/4. So everybody's contribution went up. I had a few people got in my face, this is a new tax, you're screwing me, you're stealing my money, I want it back. I said, you will get it back when you retire. This is enforced savings. No one else can touch this money. This is your money. I'm just forcing you to put more of it in up front. So you're still 7%, but you were doing the 20-year retirement, you're up in 11 plus. But you've got a 20-year retirement. So, and you usually retire at higher pay than the teachers or the group 1. So this is going to help fund that. Now, about that same time, we had to impanel a group because we were billions of dollars underpaid because in the 90s, the investments were doing fantastic. They were up around 10%. And we had assumed an 8.5%. And so everything above 8.5% they skimmed, put it in a special fund. I didn't think that was a good idea. Having been in the stock market for a while, you know it goes up and it goes down, and it goes up and it goes down. And when it's up, you've got to keep that money for when it goes down to try to level it off. But we weren't doing that. We were skimming it. We put it all in a special fund and promised it would be used for cost of living adjustments. Well, most retirement systems, except for the federal government ones, if you want to have cost of living adjustments, you have to put in more money. If you only put in a certain amount of money, then when you retire, it's a fixed income forever. If you live another 30 years, you don't go up a dime in the private ones. So this is somewhere in the middle. Obviously, we all see Social Security increases at a small amount every year. Not quite as much as inflation, but there is small increases. So that money was used for a few years in the 2000s for cost of living adjustments. And the teachers chose to have it be a contribution to the retirement, or to the medical insurance, which was getting very expensive at the time. So they chose to take all their money instead of giving it. And the other interesting thing was when we took money and put it aside for a cost of living adjustment for a designated group, you knew exactly who was in that group. You knew how old they were, what their health history was and everything, and you were projecting out to end of life for every member of that group. And they would say, okay, giving them 2% a year increase, or 2% a month, whatever, increase in that budget, that means we've got to fund this much money, but the assumption is at 8.5%. We're assuming that we put $2 million aside for you, your group, and at the 8%, by the end of your lives, you'll all be set until we run out of money. Okay, during that time, we were also not getting 8.5% on anything. That whole decade had an average of about 5%. But all these estimates kept going up and up and up, assuming 8.5%, assuming 8.5%. No, we're making 5%. The delta kept growing. So by the end of that time, we were billions of dollars short in what the actuaries said should be in that fund. We had a real problem. So in 2011 and 12, a group of our colleagues tried to get together and try to say, how are we going to fix this? One of the things they were after was, okay, instead of getting a 3-year high, we'll go to a 5-year high. A lot of systems do a 5-year high. The one I had from American Airlines went to a 5-year, your best 5 years. And quite a few other systems do 5 years rather than 3 years. And then a lot of people that were able to were spiking it. The worst case was some police chief. His last 3 years, he took the assumption, okay, if anybody's on overtime, I'm on overtime because I've got to be responsible for them. So he had about an 80 or 90-hour week's work every week for pay going into his retirement system for that 3 years, which didn't stay in there long enough to give any appreciation. But when he retired at a higher pay than what he was earning because of the spiking. That, of course, was an extreme case and doesn't happen to everybody, but occasionally when the union leader publishes who gets the most in the retirement pay, sometimes I remember one year it was just a state trooper making $105,000 a year. How did he manage that? He wasn't a captain, he wasn't a lieutenant, he wasn't a sergeant, he was just a trooper making $105,000 a year. We had to have a lot of overtime. So a few other people managed to spike it as well. So those are the things we have to worry about when we're trying to design how much do we contribute. And it's even difficult in the state budget for the 11,000 employees we have, but most of them being in Group 1, it's very difficult for them to spike because they'll get comp time or something else rather than, and a lot of them are on salary. So it doesn't affect us as much. But for police and fire and corrections department, it is a common problem. There's a lot of people with a lot of overtime, whether they want it or not. And so the idea was no more spiking, and they set something up that I thought at the time said, okay, your last 5 years, you can get no more than what you got the average overtime for all the rest of your career. So there's no sense trying to spike it, but stay to the average you had. Now I'm hearing that somebody's interpretation, whether it's the union or the retirement system, isn't counting any of their overtime in the last 5 years, and that's wrong. And I'm opposed to that, and I think we've got a bill that takes care of it. But I think the bill we're talking about...
That one's on Monday.
That was on Monday, all right. But the bill we're talking about, I'm also opposed to. it says, oh, we're in property tax problems because you took away our 35%. That was back decades ago, or a decade ago. So how come all of a sudden it's a big deal? Let's give us 7.5%. Well, that's kind of a foot in the door hoping to get 35%. And I already took care of that. We're already been now since 2012 not contributing to non-state employees' retirement systems. That's been settled. So to act like it suddenly caused the state taxes to go up. The state taxes, or the school taxes go up because of the schools. 85% going to the schools. No one's controlling the staff surge. Typically, okay, we have 38 fewer students this year, we hired 18 people. Huh? I'm seeing that in some of my school reports, and that's not untypical. So I remember back in 1999, we were sued, you have to give more, you have to help the schools more, you have to give them more money for property tax relief. Okay, 1999, we gave $200 million more back to the towns for property tax relief. 40% of them had set their school budgets so they couldn't spend any more on schools. But they gave property tax relief for 1 year for 40% of the towns. The next year, every cent we sent to them went into more money in the schools. They were hiring like crazy. And so, gee, that didn't work so well. We meant to reduce property taxes, but I guess it didn't work out. So everything that we tried since, claiming property tax relief, always just gets grabbed up and spent. And this current bill is $28 million in the fiscal note. I didn't make the number up. $28 million, and it's 7.5% to the towns to help with the contributions to the retirement system. Okay, $28 million to 1.3 million people, and assuming 1/3 are taxpayers because it's about 3 people in each house that pays taxes, $60 a taxpayer. Am I going to get excited about that for property tax savings? My taxes will go up more than $60, and the schools will keep increasing. So I see it as wasted money. It's not going to do what we intended to do. We figured out something by this committee. I give credit to Karen Umberger. The way to reduce property taxes was to take it off of the SWEPT. Everybody has it in their tax bill, so much for the school tax, so much for the SWEPT tax, statewide education property tax. That's been, for probably 20 years, $336 million. And at one point, there was a lot of fight over donor towns, and we got rid of that. You remember that well, being from a donor town. So there's a lot of big deal, no more donor towns. So everybody gets the SWEPT and gets to keep it. And some of them might need it, some of the towns don't need it, but they get it anyway. And so if you reduce the SWEPT, then that comes right off your property tax bill. I estimate maybe $250 per taxpayer is getting saved. And another important thing we frequently overlook is the people that come and vote for us, the people that come and talk to us about the taxes and so on, they only represent about 50% of those paying the taxes. 33% is paid by businesses, and another 18% is second homeowners. Some of them may live in New Hampshire, some of them may live out of state. They're all getting saved some money on property taxes when we reduce the property taxes. But one of the big selling points is usually, if we only get more people to pay income tax, we can reduce the property tax. No, because if only half the people are paying income tax and everybody's getting saved a property tax, you're all going to pay more. That's been proven in New Jersey and Connecticut in the last 30 years. So anyway, a lot of these schemes that I've been looking at for now 32 years, saying, well, this is a way to save property taxes. No, it's a false idea. It won't work. So I'm opposed to this bill. I don't think we should start contributing to municipal retirement systems again because it's uncontrollable. And we all sit here trying to control a budget and say, okay, how much more are you going to spend on that? How much, and try to cut it down. We can do nothing about municipal and counties funding it from this place. All we can do is sit and watch it and just keep paying more. So if we really do something like the SWEPT we can reduce property taxes. But any of these other schemes, the schools gobble it up. So that's my spiel on what I remember from history of the retirement system.
That was certainly the whole waterfront.
I've been waiting to explain that for a long time.
That's well done. Any questions from the committee? Yes, Maureen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative. Very helpful background. You mentioned with regards to police, fire, corrections, overtime, whether they want it or not. So my question is there categories of overtime, mandatory versus voluntary, and is it accounted for within those categories?
I can't give you a definitive answer, but my belief is that it's not. But, you know, so okay, do we count this overtime? Do we not count that overtime? If it's compulsory, do I get that added to my retirement? If it's not compulsory, so as far as I know, I don't believe when it goes into the retirement system or when it goes into your payroll, it says whether this was mandatory or whether it was voluntary. So I couldn't answer that exactly. Somebody else may know.
Other questions? Representative Leishman.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you, Representative
Good
Weiler.
to see you,
So,
Peter.
you and I were both on finance, so we started cutting 35 to 25 and ultimately to 0. And I specifically remembered as I chaired Division 1 at the time, that we all said at the time, though we can't make any promises, that we would try to restore some of that money at some point to those communities. Maybe not 35% or 7.5, as this bill is calling for, but something. But did I hear you correctly? You don't think we should make any contribution to the municipalities for retirement?
I do not, because it's too unpredictable when we're trying to do 27 months out in the future, what's going to happen in the budget that we put together. And we can't feel confident that we won't see things like some of the previous decades, all sorts of hiring and pay increases. And I know this pay increase is coming in the future because of inflation will drive them. You can't get anybody to work unless you go way up in pay. So if you've got to fill the job, you're going to pay more, and you're going to have to put more in the retirement system. I see a flood of that coming, and we just passed a budget that's going to be affected in the next year, and it's still going to be the same budget. And if we said, and we'll have to start increasing pay in the state employees. The only saving grace there will be, because there's so many vacancies, that there'll be extra money in the payroll fund to make up for probably the likely pay raises that we'll be asked to approve. So that may come out okay.
I have nothing further, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Ken.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Peter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ken, or Representative Weiler, for your rendition. Just a couple things. One thing, I do understand the exponential growth in employees and communities and around the like, but I also understand that in 1967, the population in New Hampshire was under 500,000. Now it's 1.3 million. So this growth we're talking about, there's a correlation between population and the demands on municipalities, state government, and everybody else to serve that population. So I'm not concerned about that. But what I am concerned about is I also was here when we promised the municipalities, when that was taken away, that we would do what we can to restore this. And and I hate to belabor a point, but I'm very serious when I say this. We're sitting at a time now, and who knows how long that's going to last, where we have robust monies within the state coffers. We have still to date, may change soon, robust income to the state government. And we just sat in this division, and I'm sorry to say this, and there was a vote to send $5 million to individuals who were shamed by a Ponzi scheme. And my understanding is a Ponzi scheme only are successful because of the desire or greed of the people they scam. So I'm sorry, I can't reconcile giving $5 million to that and reneging on a promise we made to communities and the people that serve those communities, and they all do serve those communities, that we made some years ago, based on an unknown factor. And that's what I understand you to say. In anything we do here, all those unknowns always exist. And all we do is the best we can to have what we decide to do come in line with those unknowns and not get destroyed by them. Just like you mentioned many, many times, the overestimates of revenues, and we go back to 2008. But what never gets mentioned, and this can happen again, and it will happen again sometimes, is the entire economy collapsed. And that's what we were dealing with. And that's when we, through necessity, had to borrow money, beg, borrow, and steal, cut where we really didn't want to make payroll.
Yep.
So, and when I did that as a company, when, say, if I had to make cuts, I had to make promises, or I had to make commitments, and I had to keep those commitments, or I was done. So, I'm sorry, I do not agree that we should not fulfill, and that's what I'm talking about only, the obligation that we made to communities and the people that serve them 10 years ago, I think, or 12
Well-
years ago, whatever it was. I think we should fulfill that. Thank you. And thank you for your talents, Mr. Chair.
In answer to those two situations, the 5 million was similar to the 100 million we're now looking at for people who were abused by government employees in the Sununu Youth Development Center. It also happened by the Attorney General and the banking commissioner, also lied to people, put out false reports, and investors relied on that information. So we're paying off for their mistakes from back 10, 12 years ago. But they deliberately lied. None of those people are in those positions anymore and have been for years. We are giving money back to the towns. They can use it for property tax relief. I've heard as high as 300 million. Some of it through ARP funds, some of it the 100 million that we all know about through the SWEPT. We're giving more money back. But here's the big difference. If we decide to give money back to help the towns, we give it back in a way. We know the exact amount. This is the big difference. This is the big difference. We know we're giving you 300 million back for this biennium. Here it is. Do what you will. But if we say, okay, we agreed to pay a portion of this, we don't know what the portion is. That makes it very difficult when you're doing a budget. When I do a budget, I have to know where the money's going. I have to know how it will result. And I have auditors to go out and tell me what the results were. And if it didn't go the way I think it is, we'll change it. But I have to know how that money will go out. If I give you an exact amount, I know where that money's going. But if I give you a promise to pay a certain amount on something, I have no clue what that certain amount will be. So you see, from a budgeting standpoint, which we're all working on very hard for all our time and all our devotion here in this committee, is we got to know exactly what we're giving away. And I don't know it when I promise a percentage. That's the thing that I can't do, and still try to make a budget that makes sense. So that's why I oppose giving a percentage of something. We are giving a percentage of the meals and rooms tax. We are promising that. But we won't give it out unless we get it. So that's kind of related. So that makes it easy.
Representative Griffin.
As I read this bill, the fiscal impact is in fiscal year 2024, and none of us know what the revenue stream will be then.
That's true.
We're in a high inflationary period now. There's a war going on in Europe, and we could be facing a recession in a flash. And I'm reluctant to commit the next legislature to spending, and that's what we would be doing
I agree.
if we completed this bill.
I agree.
Any other questions for Representative Wilder? Thank you very much. Very
Thank you for your
informative.
patience.
Representative O'Brien, would you like to make any comments?
Yes, thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Representative Mike O'Brien. I currently serve on the House ED&A Committee. For clarity in my credentials, I also am Vice President of the Board of Aldermen for the City of Nashua. I'm also was a firefighter for 35 years and currently receive So I think between wearing the hat within the state and the municipality and the helmet on the fire department, I have more than a fare thee well knowledge of the New Hampshire retirement system. In
Representative, just as a, I don't think your mic is on.
I'm sorry, that's much better. Thank you so much. I'm sure they heard me because I got the profound Irish voice, so, you know. I'll have you know, I'm passing out the papers. The family did kiss the Blarney Stone before they left, and I did too. But anyways, this is truly, if you look at it, a property tax bill. Now, if you look at one of the sheets, this was presented by the New Hampshire Municipal Association. The other letter is a cover letter for the city of Nashua. Now, I could speak about the city of Nashua, and if you look at Nashua, particularly in the figures compiled that I have to agree with, being on the budget committee for the city of Nashua, I did ask our CFO to look at it. That is over north of $2 million. In the city of Nashua, $2 million equals 1% of the tax rate. So by this 35% lack of payment costs the taxpayers of Nashua $1 million. So this could go to relieving the property tax. Now, it says there was a lot of problems. This is not anything to do with spiking. But, you know, if you want to talk about spiking, geez, we changed the whole system for one person in Dover, a police chief, and really kind of screwed the pooch on other different things statewide, because I was of the opinion if anybody works any type of overtime, the state of New Hampshire, the New Hampshire retirement system makes a deduction out of that paycheck, goes into the fund, and what I know about banks and funds and investitures, that money will double and receive a profit. By eliminating the overtime that went into the New Hampshire retirement system, greatly, in my opinion, hurt the system. Perhaps Mr. Collin could explain money's lost by removing that. Now, you say, Representative Mooney, you brought up the point of overtime and do they have a chance or opportunity? I think that goes by each individual municipality and go by each contract that the municipality works under. But basically, I can give an example in Nashua where you sign a list to work overtime, and it's a voluntary list for you to sign on, but you cannot refuse it once you get it. If you cannot work and you must seek somebody of equal caliber to work that particular overtime. That particularly holds true on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day and holidays and everything else. And the reason we have that is because we value the life safety, and I'm sure other communities do. That's what overtime does. We're talking policemen and firemen. The state of New Hampshire backdoor told municipalities how to run their own public safety. Took away that opportunity. That's a great fault, in my opinion, right there. We'll hire firefighters back because we know the type of force that is needed to fight a particular fire. Firemen get hurt. They go to fires and they put themselves at risk. Sometimes they make the supreme sacrifice. So when somebody gets injured and now with a broken leg or a broken arm or whatever is their issue, we need to backfill, and that's where the overtime comes from. Also, there's vacation and sicknesses. We just went through COVID. We had firefighters. You can't choose being a firefighter on a medical run not to treat a COVID patient. It was the same thing in my active career. We had the same issues with somebody that was HIV positive. We never refused anybody. But sometimes you do get sick or different things and exposures. And so you need the back coverage, and that's where the overtime came in. And like I say, every dollar that I made in overtime went into the retirement system. There was better ways to control the spiking, and that wasn't done. Now, again, I have to say, looking what the individual New Hampshire retirement system, you've got to look at part of the deal that's not really addressed in this bill. But Representative Weiler mentioned employees' contributions kicked up. Firefighters and police were paying 9.75% into the pension system. Now, police officers pay 11.5%, and firefighters pay 11.8%. I don't know what the difference of 0.3% is between policemen and firemen, when traditionally firefighters end up spending longer careers in working for their municipalities. But when you take, that's basically 2% lack of earning power of the employee. When you take that chunk of 2%, where do you think the employees go to make up that 2%? They come back to the municipality and they say to the municipality, I'm not making as much money as I used to, because it was taken up within the increase in the pension system. So you inflated the wages of the employees. And I think that also hurt too. But when you ever figure a pension system, Representative Weiler, there has been talk in the past of, in the example of Nashua, you pay too much. Well, isn't it the law of percentages? And basically, if you make, let's say, $5 an hour, and somebody else makes $10 an hour, you put it, take 2% out. The person that's making, 2% on $10 is putting more money away. It's equal in the law of percentages. The employees are covering their particular costs at, like I say, 11.8 or 11.5%. So it should equal it out. So there is a big thing. The big gap that occurs right now is looking at the numbers and look at the amount of cities and towns. And I think somebody from the New Hampshire Municipal Association can explain it better. But you can see the how this really is a property tax bill that affects the towns. Now, my recommendation would be pay back to 35%. You committed to it in 1967. And in 2012, wasn't it supposed to sunset and go back to the 35%? Or at least implied? And it didn't. So, believe me, this is basement pricing coming up to help out your cities and towns to go into 7.5%. It will go a long way to really support. So I hope I answered some of your questions, and I think we have other people that probably back up, more than what I say here. So not to waste your time, but thank you.
Would you entertain questions?
Oh, absolutely.
Anyone have any questions for Representative O'Brien? Representative Leishman?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Nice to see you, Representative O'Brien.
And to you, sir.
Do you know where the 7.5% number came from in this bill, or?
No, and I'm quite, if I may say so, if you look at the author of this bill, the lead representative was Representative Cushing, God bless his soul. And what a wonderful gentleman, and I'm sure we all agree. And terrible in his untimely passing. But he's the one that authored this. I did offer one previously at 5%. It did not make it past the House, if you remember, last year. That would have been a better bargain basement deal for you. But I have to strongly agree, and I agree with this 7.5%. So it came from the original offer. But in the city of Nashua, if you look at the numbers, it is really coming out to 1%. So if that is reflective, probably you'll see that more along trending, maybe with the other municipalities as well.
Thanks. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else like to make comments to the work group? Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Chairman Emmerich. My name is Catherine Heck and committee members. I represent the New Hampshire Municipal Association, and I did just want to say that we did put together an anecdotal survey with 62 political subdivisions submitting what this bill and the impact would be directly on their budgets. And
Excuse, could you spell your last name? I didn't get it.
yes, sir, Heck, like what the heck, H-E-C-K.
Okay, I wanted to make sure it was that. Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. I get asked that a lot. So I did just want to reiterate that this is anecdotal. Some did the exact calculation down to the penny. Others did a little bit of rounding. But it was to show that there's overwhelming support from the municipalities and our association that this would in fact be greatly beneficial to our New Hampshire municipalities, school districts. There's a county represented here, as well as a fire village district. So I can certainly take any questions.
Anybody have any questions for Ms. Heck?
Yes, I believe one was handed to you. If not, I can get you one, sir.
Is it this one?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
You're welcome. Thank you very much for your time.
thank you. Anyone else care to comment? Seeing none, we'll come back to the Division One Committee. Does anybody have any comments?
Yeah,
Yes, Representative.
thank you, Mr. Chair. I know that the policy committee, when they looked at this bill, they recommended ITL on the bill. And I know when it went on the floor of the House, on the initial vote, ITL passed. And later in the day, when numbers were dwindling in the House, there was a reconsideration motion made, and the bill passed by a tiny margin. But I keep coming back to the fact that we have no control over the hiring of municipal employees. So it's really a moving target. But more importantly, the fiscal impact of this is in 2024. And we, as the current legislature, I don't believe, should be committing a future legislature to spending. And all that having been said, I'd like to make a motion if it's in order.
Certainly.
I'd like to move that we ITL this bill.
Okay, motion's been made for ITL. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Representative Mooney. Okay, will the clerk call the roll?
Okay, Mr. Chairman, before I vote and call the roll, I'd like to just to say that out of respect for the Division One committee, I will vote to ITL. However, in front of the entire Finance Committee and on the floor of the House, I will vote to, not to ITL, but make a motion to ought to pass. That being said, I will call the roll with your
Please.
permission. Okay. Okay, Chairman Yermak,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Griffin,
Yes.
the clerk votes yes with reservations. Representative Mooney,
Yes.
Representative Leishman,
No.
Representative Hatch,
No.
and Representative Walls is absent, so the vote is 4-2 in favor of the ITL.
Okay, we will forward this to the full committee for a executive session. I believe it is on the 23rd. With that, the hearing for the work session for House Bill 1417 is adjourned.
We are still live.
No kidding, more than I wanted to hear.
We are still live.
Thank you.
That's my job.